If you would like to extend the parking mode recording times, or you simply want to protect your car's battery from being fully discharged by a parking mode dash camera, a dashcam battery pack is an important investment in achieving that goal. Recently I purchased this BlackboxMyCar PowerCell 8 because it has 25% higher battery capacity than the competitors on the market. And I'm going to walk you through the contents of the box, some of the specifications, and show you some of my recommended hardwiring configurations. So let's get into it. The PowerCell 8 Dashcam battery pack is produced by eGen in South Korea as a private label product for BlackboxMyCar.com. It utilizes lithium iron phosphate battery technology with an internal storage capacity of 7,500 milliamp hours or 96 watt hours. That's 25% above the leading competitors on the market. eGen is also the manufacturer of the Cellink Neo Dashcam battery packs. And if you'd like to extend the total storage capacity of the PowerCell 8, you would need to purchase a Cellink Neo Extended Dashcam battery pack, which will add a total storage capacity of 6,600 milliamp hours or 84.5 watt hours. If you do purchase the optional extended battery pack, you will connect the external battery pack via a cable supplied with it to this particular port on the edge of the PowerCell 8. Next, we have the low, off, and high power mode selection switch. Set it to off when you're not going to be using the PowerCell 8 for an extended period of time. Set it to low if you're using the 12-volt power port adapter to supply charging power to the PowerCell 8, and that limits the charging current to 5 amps. If you're going to hardwire your PowerCell 8 to receive its charging power from the fuse box using the fuse tap and the hardwiring cable supplied, or an alternative approach where I extend that a bit to source power directly from the battery using a relay, you could set it to high, and the default charging amps in the application at that point is defined as 7.5 amps. You can go into the admin page of the smartphone app and change that anywhere between 4 and 9 charging amps. Next, we have the firmware update port. This is a port that should be utilized by an authorized service technician only. Next, we have a USB Type-A power port, which is available to supply power to a Wi-Fi hotspot if you're using that for connectivity for your dash camera, or you could simply charge your smartphone. Next, we have the dashcam output power port. This is where you would plug in the output power cable that you selected when you ordered the product. It would either be the cigarette lighter or power port adapter plug, the unspliced one where you would need to then do your own wiring to the wiring of your dash camera, or the thinkware or Viafo options. You would plug this in and that would supply power to the dash cam. Now, going from left to right, the pins in this particular connector, the left one, which is a yellow wire for the PowerCell 8, is the constant power. The second from the left is the accessory power, switch power that you get when you turn on the ignition and supply power to the PowerCell 8 through the input power cable. And then the third one from the left is the ground wire. So if you use the power port adapter, it only has 2 wires. So if you're trying to power a dash camera that needs 3 wires, make sure you get the appropriate cable during the checkout process when you purchase the product. Next, we have the vehicle input section of the PowerCell 8. In the center there, you can see the connector for the input power cables, be it the power port adapter or the hardwiring cable. On the left side of that connection is the ground, and the right side is the positive. And on the top end of the vehicle input section of the PowerCell 8, we have the 3 status LEDs. On the left, we have the red LED, which will flash on and off when it's first turning on and charging. Then in the center, we have the green LED, which will turn on when the PowerCell 8 has reached a full 100% charge level. And then it will turn back off when it goes below 100%. And then on the right, we have a blue LED, which is an indication that the smartphone app has connected over Bluetooth to the PowerCell 8. Here are the additional items included with the PowerCell 8 in the box. You have Velcro strips to help secure the PowerCell 8 case to a location in your vehicle. In the lower left, we have the add a fuse or fuse tap, which is used to source power for the PowerCell 8 using the hardwiring power cable. And make sure you select the appropriate fuse type for your vehicle during the checkout process. And just to the right of that, we have the power output cable, and you have multiple options during the checkout process for this as well. I chose the unspliced version, which terminates in 3 wires that you could then have to hardwire yourself to the appropriate cabling for your dash camera. you have options for a 12-volt power port, and then an option for ThinkWare, where it already has the ThinkWare power adapter connected to it, where there are 2 options for view-off cameras as well. So make sure you select that appropriately during the checkout process. Next, we have the 2 ways of supplying power to the PowerCell 8. The first one being the 12-volt power port adapter, and the second one being the hardwiring power cable, which is used together with the add a fuse or fuse tap. The 12-volt power port adapter cannot supply as much current to the PowerCell 8 for charging, so when you're using the 12-volt power port as the power source for the PowerCell 8, you must set the slide switch on the front of the PowerCell 8 to low, which caps the charging current to 5 amps. Even though the charging current is capped at 5 amps, it appears that the total amp draw for the PowerCell 8 is closer to 6, and I'll show you that in my testing later in the video. The second approach to supply power to the PowerCell 8 is using the hardwiring power cable with the add a fuse or fuse tap. That way you can run the charging current at a higher level to reduce the charging times for the PowerCell 8. The documented approach for that is use the hardwiring cable with the fuse tap to source power from a fuse box. I'm going to show you an alternative approach to that, which I think is a little bit safer, given the fact that the max amp draw in my testing for this particular unit is close to 14 amps. My approach is different in the fact that it uses a relay to control when power is supplied to the PowerCell 8, and the fuse tap, instead of supplying power directly to the PowerCell 8 for charging, uses the accessory power from the fuse box to control the relay. That way the power that is sourced for the relay from the battery then passes through the relay and becomes the charging power into that hardwiring power cable for the PowerCell 8. You isolate the high amp draw away from the fuse box, and I think that makes it a little bit safer. And lastly, we have the user manual, and this one actually has a lot of good information, so make sure you read it before you attempt to install and use the PowerCell 8. I'm going to test the PowerCell 8 total amp draw with the low off high switch set to low, using the 12-volt power port adapter just like you would be using inside of the vehicle, plugging into a power port, and we'll see what it consumes as far as total amperage, because the app seems to report the charging amperage, which seems to be underreporting the total amperage draw. So let's go ahead, it's set to low. I'm connected over Bluetooth, the blue light is on. My camera is a Blackview DR900X 2-channel, and I have a power supply where it's going to supply a constant 13.6 volts with a maximum of 8 amps. So I'm now going to turn on the power. And we're seeing the red blinking light, and there's the beep from the PowerCell 8. And the camera should be booting up at this point as well. And right now, the app is showing 12.1 volts and 5 charging amps. Let's take a screenshot of that.
Light view for your safe driving. Starting normal recording.
So there is the total amperage. The app is reporting 5.0 amps, and as we can see, it's actually more than that, 5.69. At times I have seen this actually go up to 6 amps, so we'll see it ramp up here a little potentially. As we have it powered up here and charging with the camera running, we can see that the amp draw is ramping up a bit. The app is still reporting 5.0 amps total draw, which is the charging amps, but the total draw seems to be 5.78 at this point. The app is showing 83% charge level, charging voltage at 12.7 now, just bumping to 12.8 with a charging amperage of 5.0. And you can see that that's not actually the current draw, so the app is reporting what it believes it will be using for the charging amperage, not the total amperage. And we've gotten the full charge green LED light on the PowerCell 8 right here. So we have those bursts of amp draws as the charge level drops below 100%, and then it tops it off and the cycle repeats. There are 2 approaches to supply power to the PowerCell 8. We looked at the first one using the power port adapter and how much amperage it consumed total for the charging of the PowerCell 8 while providing power to the camera. The second approach is to use the hardwiring input cable supplied with the unit as well. It allows you to supply power from a fuse tap, or I'll show you an alternative approach a little bit later in the video where you can still use the fuse tap, but that's to supply the controlling power for a relay. I'm going to set the charging current to 5, 7.5, which is again is the default value, and 9 to see what the total amp draw is. And with it set to 5, we can see that it's drawing 5.885 according to this multimeter, and my amp clamp is showing 5.43. So that's very similar to what I was seeing with the low setting with the power port adapter, which makes sense since it's set to 5 charging amps. This is the second test with the charging current on the ambient page set to 7.5 amps, and the total amp draw is just under 10, 9.96, where the amp clamp is saying 9.5 amps. And once again, we can see that the app is reporting 7.5 amps, which is the charging amps, not the total amp draw. And you can see that I don't have the dash camera connected because the output is at 0 milliamps. And this is the last test with the charging current set to 9.0 amps. But the total amps you can see is at 13.81 on the center multimeter there, and the multimeter on the left of the amp clamp, it's reporting 13.4. So the total amp draw, I wanted to show you that so that you make sure you size the appropriate fuse and wiring when you're hardwiring the PowerCell 8 into your vehicle. I ran a PowerCell 8 battery discharge test using my Blackview DR900X 2-channel, and it lasted just a little over 24 hours and 17 minutes. I had the low voltage cutoff set to 11.8 volts, and that's when the Blackview decided to turn itself off. I looked up the Blackview DR900X 2-channel camera on the power duration capabilities section of the PowerCell 8 page on the BlackboxMyCar website. The Blackview DR900X 2-channel camera lasted almost 4 hours beyond the estimate listed on this page. Now, the speediness did not transfer over to the charging side of this. I ran a test where I charged the PowerCell 8 using the cigarette plug or the power port adapter, and it took longer than the estimate here. It shows 50 minutes for the hardwiring connection or 80 minutes for the cigarette plug or power port adapter. My test results using the power port adapter to charge the PowerCell 8, it was configured to actually power the dashcam during the test. It took an hour, 44 minutes, and 34 seconds before it fully charged the battery. And then after that, it would float between 100% and 99% like you would expect, but the full charge time was much longer than I expected based on the projection on the BlackboxMyCar website. I have not run a full test with the hardwiring cable yet because I have yet to install it in the vehicle. I'm going to go on some test runs in the next week or two, and I'll place a comment down in the comment section with my additional findings for that. In this section, I'd like to discuss a couple of the hardwiring options when it comes to supplying power to the PowerCell 8 using the hardwiring cable supplied with the product. This diagram depicts the suggested hardwiring configuration from BlackboxMyCar, using the hardwiring cable supplied with the PowerCell 8, connecting it to a fuse tap once you've identified an accessory or switch power fuse socket within the fuse box in your vehicle. When I contacted BlackboxMyCar support, their recommendation was to use a fuse socket with a pre-existing 20 or 30 amp fuse in it. And based on the current draw test that I showed you earlier in the video, you can see that the PowerCell 8 can demand up to close to 14 or 15 amps. And adding that much load to a pre-existing fuse socket that takes 20 or 30 amps already, I think is a bit of an overreach. The addition of a fuse tap to a fuse box is an almost religious debate. I have a couple videos on my channel talking about that, but I would recommend a slightly different approach. This is what I would suggest for installing any device such as a dashcam battery pack or light bar or anything that requires anything over 10 amps potentially to power the device into a vehicle. Instead of using the fuse tap to power the device itself, I would suggest using the fuse tap to control a 4-terminal relay. The power required for controlling the relay is a very minimal amount, well below 1 amp. That way you can use almost any switched accessory fuse socket within your fuse box, and then you would source the power for the new accessory from the vehicle's battery with an inline fuse, and then the inline fuse protects that circuit. Then the power goes to terminal 30 of the relay. The control circuit gets its power from the fuse tap going to terminal 85, and then terminal 86 is to ground. Now I've seen some charts show 85 and 86 in reverse configuration. Make sure you follow the suggested configuration for your relay, but I believe it really shouldn't matter if 85 or 86 is configured with positive or ground. And then terminal 87 goes from the relay over to the new accessory, and in this case the PowerCell 8. That way you have the ability to control when the PowerCell 8 gets its charging power, and that way you're isolating the high current draw to the relay circuit rather than directly from the fuse box. I'd recommend using automotive relays that can handle a 30 amp load and also have 14 wire gauge as their minimum gauge. Again, the smaller the wire gauge, the more load they can carry. So 14 or 12, most commonly I'm finding 14, but there are some 16 wire gauge relays. Make sure you get one with at least a 14 wire gauge. The other recommendation here is to make sure that you have the ground from the load not go directly to the negative post of the battery. I would suggest that it just grounds somewhere on the vehicle body or a ground point in the vehicle. There are vehicles such as mine where there's an amp meter on the ground wire that goes from the negative post of the battery to the ground point on the vehicle, and it monitors the amount of load on the charging system at that point. So if you connect it directly to the battery, that particular item will not be able to monitor that load and then will not sufficiently charge the battery because it cannot detect that additional load. So make sure you connect it directly to a ground point near where you're installing the device. One of the benefits of having the PowerCell 8 produced by eGen produces the Cellink Neo battery packs as well, and their application for iOS and Android, the Cellink Neo Plus App, it can be used with the PowerCell 8. You can use it to monitor the current charging volts and amps, the output volts and amps, the total battery capacity known to the application with the PowerCell 8, that's 7,500 milliamp hours, and the full charging time estimate, as well as the usable time, which is an estimate of how long the Dashcam battery pack can continue to supply the current output volts and amps. You can then invoke the admin page by clicking on the settings icon and then type in the admin password, which by default is 1234. And once you type that in, click on OK. Here on the settings available on the admin page, you can turn the on and off beeps. By default, those are on. You can turn off the charging of the battery if there's a situation where it wants to charge but you don't want it to charge at that point in time. You see that the battery capacity for the PowerCell 8 is defined as 7,500 milliamp hours, and if you add an extended battery, you can add that additional capacity, which is usually 6,600 per extended battery that you're adding. And then when the low, off, high switch is set to high and you come into this page, you can define the total amps that are available during the charging of the battery. It ranges from 4 to 9, and by default, when you receive the unit, is set to 7.5 amps. If you do alter the charging current and run it up to a 9 amp configuration, make sure your fuse and wiring supports that particular option. If you would like to change the admin password, click on the lock icon on the top of the screen, then enter your new 4-digit admin password and click on OK. If you are going to send the unit back in for warranty repair for any reason, I would suggest changing the admin password back to the default of 1234. If you're considering the purchase of a PowerCell 8 Dashcam battery pack, you might want to do so right now during their Black Friday sale. The PowerCell 8 by itself is being offered at $58 off a list price at $341.99 US dollars. And if you'd like to get the PowerCell 8 with the Cellink Neo extended battery pack, that's a savings of $86 off the list price at $593.99 US dollars. Next, you make the power output cable selection, and you have the choices of with socket, which is the 12-volt power port socket, Unspliced, which is basically just ends in 3 wires, and you wire it to whatever your dash camera requires to be powered. And then you have the choices of the output cable being spliced together with a thinkware hardwiring kit or one of the Viofo offerings in that list. Now you get to select a free add a fuse or a fuse tap for your particular installation. Make sure you find out what fuse types are used in your vehicle and select the corresponding add a fuse or fuse tap in the selection. The PowerCell 8 comes with a 1-year warranty through BlackboxMyCar, but if you would like to purchase an additional third-party warranty through CPS Insurance, you can make a 2 or 3-year selection for the price listed on the screen. RetroCarGuy 530 is an affiliate for BlackboxMyCar, so if you go to the video description section and click on the affiliate links, RetroCarGuy 530 will make a commission on your purchase, but at no extra cost to you. In fact, you'll save 5% on your purchases over $250 US or $300 Canadian. But if you click on one of the affiliate links and you don't see that discount in the checkout, make sure you type in coupon code RCG530 or RetroCarGuy 530. I hope this video has provided the information necessary to make an informed choice about purchasing the BlackboxMyCar PowerCell 8 Dashcam battery pack. If you have found it to be helpful, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, hit that bell notification to be notified when I upload new videos just like this to the channel. Check out the video description section for my BlackboxMyCar affiliate links to save 5% on the purchase. Thanks for coming to the channel. See you in the next one.